Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions. The next item of business is a statement by John Swinney on historical policies affecting Gypsy traveller communities. The First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the First Minister up to 10 minutes, please.
President Officer, today the Scottish Government has published reports which highlight the injustice and prejudice that Gypsy traveller individuals, families and communities have faced as a result of the historical policies and decisions colloquially known as the Tinker experiments. While these events predate this Parliament, it is important to recognise that the impacts of these policies are still felt today. I know that there are members of the communities impacted in the public gallery today. I welcome them to the Chamber and I applaud their tenacity in pursuing these issues over such a long period of time. Since its inception, this Parliament has demonstrated its willingness to address uncomfortable and, for some, incredibly painful elements of our national story. My statement today is set within that context. I invite Parliament to consider that only by confronting these difficult truths from our past, we are able to move forward, learning from the mistakes of the past as we work towards a more just and equitable Scotland, a Scotland that truly honours and celebrates the rich culture of Gypsy travellers. Presiding Officer, it falls to this Government to state without ambiguity that what happened to Gypsy traveller communities in Scotland was unacceptable. This starts with formally acknowledging and apologising for the harm caused by these actions. It is clear to the Government that stark prejudice and lack of cultural awareness led to a series of unfair and unjust policies. These policies resulted in children being removed from families, and families were forced to live in substandard accommodation and degrading conditions. The trauma that this has caused to individuals, families and groups, including those who regard themselves as victims of Tinker experiments, is significant and long-lasting. So, as First Minister of Scotland, I want to say this directly to Gypsy traveller communities. The Tinker experiments should not have happened. Those policies were wrong, and we recognise how much it is still hurting so many today. And more than anything else, I want to say this. On behalf of Scotland, we are sorry. Presiding Officer, we have come a long way since the Tinker experiments, but there is still much to do. We still see prejudice and ignorance today. Indeed, discrimination towards Gypsy travellers is often described as, and I quote, the last bastion of respectable racism, end quote. It is not. We must be united in unequivocally condemning all forms of hatred, discrimination and prejudice, particularly those that still cause members of Gypsy traveller communities in Scotland to feel unsafe, unwelcome or marginalised in their daily lives or in the expression of their identity and their way of life. This statement comes at a particularly important time as we celebrate Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month every June. Through celebration, education and raising awareness, the month plays a vital role in challenging prejudice, amplifying the voices of Gypsy, Traveller and Roma communities and reshaping public understanding of these issues. The national event organised by the Scottish Government at Dynamic Earth last week highlighted the important work being carried out by many of our national and local partners to improve the lives of Gypsy traveller communities in Scotland. It also celebrated the rich culture and heritage of these communities. I understand that the event was very well attended and very well received, and I would warmly encourage members, indeed anyone, to attend similar events in the future. We must all play our part in eradicating racism, inequality and injustice, and in building a better, fairer world where every person has the same opportunities and where everyone's individual needs are recognised and met. We can only achieve this by working together in partnership, ensuring communities are at the very heart of our discussions. That is why a short initial community consultation was commissioned to engage with members of Gypsy traveller communities impacted by historical policies. I know that the Minister for Equalities attended one of these sessions in person and was deeply moved by the powerful insights and experiences that were shared with such courage. We recognise that revisiting past trauma is never easy, and we are truly grateful for the generosity and the openness shown by members of the community throughout this process. We are also aware that others may still wish to share their stories, and I want to reassure them that the Government is here to listen whenever and however those individuals feel ready to explain their story. We have now published a summary of the results of this consultation, along with the archival research report, and are keen to continue the conversation to find the best and the most effective way forward. We also recognise that historical policies have affected individuals and groups differently, with both direct and indirect impacts. These effects vary based on multiple factors and often carry intergenerational consequences. Understanding this complexity is crucial as we work towards collective progress on this issue. Improving the lives of our Gypsy traveller communities is essential if we are to tackle deep-rooted inequalities and deliver a fairer Scotland. The progress we have made since the events outlined in this report is significant. It is testament to the collaborative work of national and local government, the dedication and tireless efforts of third sector organisations, and most of all, the determination of Gypsy travellers to ensure better futures for their communities. Since the publication of our first Gypsy traveller-focused action plan, the Scottish Government has taken specific actions to improve the lives of Gypsy traveller communities in Scotland in key areas such as accommodation, tackling discrimination and improving representation, access to public services and also access to education. Last year, we published an updated action plan building on the successes we have had to date. At the same time, we recognise that there is still much more work to be done, and the experiences shared underline the need for systemic change, greater accountability and, crucially, a shift in attitudes at every level. We must do better. Recognising the harm caused by this prejudice is only the first step. It must be followed by meaningful action. This includes challenging stereotypes, confronting everyday discrimination and committing to long-term efforts that promote understanding, respect and equity for Gypsy travellers. Presiding Officer, we have reached this moment due to the efforts of many people. Individuals in Gypsy traveller communities have argued with care and tenacity for these injustices to be addressed. Some have not lived long enough to hear the words that I have shared with Parliament today. I pay tribute to all of their commitment to the pursuit of justice. I would also like to pay tribute to our late and former colleague and Minister for Equalities, Christina McKelvey. Christina fought tirelessly to address the inequality and the injustice that Gypsy traveller communities faced. I know that this apology today would be the recognition and the long-anticipated justice that Christina worked so hard to deliver for so many. I pay tribute to Christina McKelvey, who always listened to those who suffered injustice and acted to address that injustice. Presiding Officer, our hope is that we now have a foundation for continuing to build trust and the fostering of renewed relationships with all those who have been impacted by historical policies. As we look ahead, the Scottish Government is determined to maintain a strong leadership role in advocating for the rights of Gypsy traveller individuals and in celebrating the rich history, culture and contribution of these communities. An apology is not the end, but I hope the beginning of a new conversation. We want to continue this dialogue and to work together to keep improving the lives of Gypsy traveller individuals, families and communities in Scotland. That is the commitment I make to the communities and to Parliament today. Our duty is to address the errors of the past and to work for a better future.
Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the First Minister for early sight of the statement. It is difficult to calculate how many Gypsy travellers have been forced to alter their lives by historic policies, but this impact has been deeply felt by that community. Those affected have said such policies destroyed lives, shattered and separated families, and affected generation after generation. Members of the Gypsy traveller community have been petitioning for an apology from the Government for years, so I welcome the long overdue apology this afternoon. Researchers have highlighted that it is the responsibility of the Scottish Government, so why has it taken so long for that apology to happen? And is the Scottish Government considering compensation for those affected? And if that is the case, when is that anticipated to happen, First Minister?
First Minister.
So let me welcome Alexander Stewart's comments on the apology that I have given to Parliament and to the Gypsy traveller communities today. The Government has been working to address this issue, and I made reference in the course of my comments to the leadership that was given on this issue by Christina McKelvey. Christina engaged with the Gypsy traveller community faithfully and raised those issues, and we have now addressed those issues after the production of the research report, and I'm glad that's been welcomed by Alexander Stewart. In relation to further steps on this issue, as I indicated, the Government has offered an apology today. We will engage with the community further as part of encouraging and motivating a dialogue to address the injustices that have been experienced, and the Minister for Equalities will take forward that dialogue with the Gypsy traveller community in the period to come.
Okay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the First Minister for advance sight of the statement and welcome the formal apology that he has made today to Scotland's Gypsy and traveller communities. The Government is right to acknowledge that, whilst occurring before the establishment of this Parliament, the Scottish State and its public institutions should recognise the wrongs that were visited upon Gypsy and traveller communities. The Tinker experiments were wrong and should never have happened, and they expose cultural injustice and prejudice and failures to some of our most marginalised communities. And whilst they occurred many decades ago, it is clear that they have a lasting effect. And, Presiding Officer, on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party, I add our apology to that of the First Minister. We have heard already that it has taken a long time to come to this day, and it is important that we pay tribute once again to all of the individuals in the Gypsy traveller community who have spoken out and have had to relive those injustices in order to get the recognition and the apology they deserve. And I think it's also important to put on record not just the work of Christina McKelvey, which I accord myself with the comments of the First Minister on, but all of the other organisations in Scotland, in particular the Scottish Human Rights Commission, under the stewardship of Professor Angela O'Hagan, and others who continue to work on these issues. Now, in response to Alexander Stewart, the First Minister, I acknowledge once again that this is the beginning of a conversation and a process, but I don't think he said in any definitive terms whether there would be consideration of a redress scheme. So I wonder if he's able to say anything further on that, and if not, if he's able to say why that is, and whether he thinks that redress in the form of compensation is appropriate in this case.
First Minister.
Can I welcome the comments that Paul O'Kane has put on the record and the acknowledgement of the shared obligation that we have on this matter. And it is right, as I indicated in my statement, for those who hold office today to act on behalf of the state in relation to failings and errors that have happened long before our responsibilities started. And I do that unreservedly to Parliament today. I also associate myself very much with his comments in relation to the contribution of other organisations such as the Scottish Human Rights Commission, who of course have advanced many of these questions. Mr O'Kane's question to me raises the issue of cultural prejudice, and of course we live in a society today where issues of prejudice are issues that we are wrestling with in different forms and in different shapes in our society today, and we must be vigilant, and Mr O'Kane knows the degree to which I am concerned about these issues, in confronting the sources of that prejudice, because we are acknowledging here historic prejudice, but there are there are versions of prejudice which are prevalent in our society today. The Government does not have immediate plans on a redress scheme, but as I indicated in my response to Alexander Stewart, this is the start of further dialogue with the community, and I am keen to make sure that we follow up the apology with means of supporting the community and individuals within the community to be able to overcome the damage that's been done in the past.
Elena Whittam, to be followed by Pam Gossel.
Presiding Officer, today is a historic moment on the path to reconciliation, and I welcome the First Minister's apology and much-needed recognition of the deep harms caused by state policies like the Tinker experiment and the associated practice of trafficking Scottish traveller children overseas. Does the First Minister agree that beyond acknowledgement, true reconciliation and the healing of intergenerational cultural trauma requires ongoing community-led investment in support and cultural preservation for Scotland, Gypsy and traveller communities, which must remain a priority for this Government? And if I may, Presiding Officer, can I also take this time to thank community members, activists and academics such as Rosanna and Seamus McPhee, Dr Lynn Tammy Conley and David Donaldson, and all of the third sector partners who never stopped pushing for justice. Christina McKelvey, Kevin Stewart and I were deeply privileged to work together with members of the community on the first action plan, and today's apology can now be placed at the heart of this work.
First Minister.
Can I thank Elena Whittam for her question and acknowledge the importance that she attaches, and I'm glad that she has done so, to the term reconciliation, because I think that is the route for us to having a process of healing with a community that has been badly damaged. I hope that the steps the Government has taken today and the fact that I am here offering the apology on behalf of the State to the Gypsy traveller community indicates the seriousness and the significance with which the Government considers this matter and the need for it to be addressed. I have, in my own constituency capacity, engaged with a number of the individuals that Elena Whittam referred to, Roseanne and Seamus McPhee, who are constituents of mine, so I am familiar directly with the experiences that have been recounted here, and I'm grateful for their engagement on this question, and I'm determined to ensure that the approach to reconciliation can be built on the basis of the apology that's been offered today, and that's the commitment the Government offers to Parliament.
Pam Gossel, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Despite Scottish Government action, Scotland's Gypsy traveller communities are still some of the most marginalised and isolated. These communities still face significant challenges, particularly in accommodation, with sites across Scotland in need of funding and updates. Just last year, funding for improvements at a site in Dumbarton was delayed despite a desperate need for investment. Such challenges are found across Scotland. What discussions has the Scottish Government had with councils to ensure necessary upgrades have been made by local authorities? First Minister.
I think there is ongoing work underway with local authorities to address the issue that Pam Gossel puts to me. Obviously, we work, many of these issues are, indeed all of these issues, will be taken forward at local level because they involve local planning considerations to be taken into account, and it's right that local authorities are in the lead in this respect. The Government will, as part of the process that I am setting out today, be engaged with local authorities about how that agenda is taken forward, because the best way to address the errors and the failings of the past, particularly in relation to questions such as poor accommodation, is to make sure in the future accommodation is better and meets the needs of the communities. And that's the objective that the Government brings to Parliament today.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Katie Clark.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the First Minister's statement today, and I'd like to thank Minister Cockab-Stewart for the work and passion she's put into fulfilling the legacy of our dear colleague Christina McKelvey, and to all organisations and people involved. Would the First Minister agree with me that the Gypsy traveller communities should be involved every step of the way in progressing their futures, and that their voices must be heard as a priority in light of the terrible injustices they have historically endured?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, it's absolutely vital that the community is involved every step of the way in that endeavour. It is the failures of the past were because people were not listened to and not respected. They must be listened to and respected in the future, and that's what the Government will deliver.
Katie Clark, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
2 UN reports have highlighted the persecution of the Gypsy traveller community in Scotland, the need for an apology and further action. The First Minister says the Scottish Government will listen. The community here today are asking for restitution and reparations. Would the First Minister agree with me that where there are human rights abuses, compensation is appropriate?
First Minister.
Well, these are the issues that we now have to consider, and the starting point to the dialogue is the apology that I have made today on behalf of the State. It is not the end of the process, it is the beginning of another part of that process, and that is what we will take forward in dialogue with the community. And as I've just explained to Rona Mackay, that will be an engaged process that involves the community every step of the way.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by Maggie Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The report describes, and I quote, a forced and systematic initiative to remove Gypsy traveller children from their families and communities. Now, how is the Scottish Government going to work to ensure that members of the Gypsy traveller community who were affected by this shameful period in their history are supported in coming to terms with the ordeals they suffered and also in getting closure?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Mr McMillan highlights some of the truly disturbing contents of the archival report that has been set out. And as Mr McMillan will be familiar, the Government's approach in relation to the whole area of children's policy is to try to, in all circumstances, as far as is possible, to act to keep families together when they face any form of challenge or difficulty. So therefore, to read in a report of essentially a policy that was forcing separation between parents and families is deeply, deeply uncomfortable and disturbing, hence the importance of the apology that I've given to Parliament today. But Mr McMillan's question highlights one very clear example of the trauma that the Gypsy traveller communities have suffered. And what we must do as part of the ongoing work is support individuals through having the assistance in coming to terms with that trauma through the various interventions that we make through the action plan. And that will be listening to the community, understanding their needs and addressing those needs will lie at the heart of the Government's response.
Maggie Chapman, to be followed by Kevin Stewart.
I thank the First Minister for his statement, and on behalf of the Scottish Greens, I welcome Gypsy Traveller community members to the Parliament. I'm glad you can be here to witness this today. Can I recognise community members Dr Lynn Tammy Connolly, Rosanna and Seamus McPhee and Davy Donaldson. Their determination is why we are here today. Because this apology is important and I hope signifies a new direction for how we, as Scotland's Parliament, engage with, support and treat members of the Gypsy traveller communities across Scotland. I will continue the conversations I've been having with the Scottish Government on next steps. We must discuss reparations and redress. But for now, First Minister, how can we ensure that the Government's apology, long overdue but here now, will be the catalyst for other public bodies with a role in the Tinker experiment to properly examine their complicity, to apologise to communities and then act, to ensure the provision of proper services, from housing and healthcare to education and cultural recognition, that deliver dignity, respect and justice to communities across our country?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the points that Maggie Chapman makes about the determination and the tenacity of the community are points that I readily acknowledge, and we wouldn't be here today had it not been for the determination of the community to ensure that these wrongs were addressed. We now need to move on to build on the actions that are already underway through the action plan to provide for better lives and better outcomes for members of the Gypsy traveller community, and that is what the Government will do. Now, Maggie Chapman raises other issues about other public institutions. Some of those will be institutions responsible to the Government and essentially by by me providing the apology has been given on their behalf. That's how that should be interpreted. There will, of course, be other bodies that are not directly under my control, and I hope they will listen with care to what I have said to Parliament today and act accordingly. I can't direct them, but I do hope that other bodies will take the lead from what I've said to Parliament today in acknowledging the importance of addressing the fact that a wrong was inflicted on the Gypsy Traveller community, and the process of righting it starts with apologising for that error in the first place.
Kevin Stewart to be followed by Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I too welcome today's statement. The First Minister said in that statement, an apology is not the end, but I hope the beginning of a new conversation. And I have every faith in his government carrying on that conversation and listening to the Gypsy Traveller community. I had the great pleasure of serving with Elena Whittam and Christina McKelvey on the working group that came up with the Gypsy Traveller Action Plan in cooperation with the community. Christina McKelvey was immense at bringing folk together. So what can the government do to bring folk from the travelling community and other communities together, to have conversations, to foster understanding, to defeat prejudice and to create friendships?
First Minister.
I think the route to addressing Mr Stewart's question lies in the approach and the legacy of Christina McKelvey, who acted with dignity, empathy and respect to all other communities in our society. So those were, as Mr Stewart will know as a long-serving colleague of mine, how much we were all influenced and affected by the skills and the attributes of Christina McKelvey in demonstrating how that empathy and dignity and respect could be deployed in community relationships in our country. And I certainly want to make sure that in the actions of government we learn from that experience and from that approach to make sure that we can succeed in addressing the substantial question that Mr Stewart puts to me today.
Jamie Green to be followed by Alistair Allen.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This apology, whilst overdue, is very welcome, and the Liberal Democrats unreservedly add our voice to it. But let's not pretend that the rhetoric and narrative towards the Gypsy Traveller community from some quarters has always been just or justified, particularly from politicians, and I hope that apology is universal in this chamber. The problems of yesterday, of course, are still many of the problems of today, be it higher suicide rates in the community, educational attainment and access to those basic fundamental public services and human rights, such as health and housing. There's clearly more to be done. Given the scale of these challenges, will the First Minister commit to a full parliamentary debate in government time after the summer recess so we can discuss them?
First Minister.
On the question of a parliamentary debate, Mr Green will appreciate that even commitments of that type are above the pay grade of the First Minister, but I'll make sure the Minister for Parliamentary Business is well aware of the request for that, and that can be discussed with the Parliamentary Bureau. I think Mr Green's point is really important, that we have to take a human rights-based approach to all of these questions, and that's the foundation of respectful treatment of individuals in our society, and that's what lies at the heart of the government statement that's been made to Parliament today. Parliament has endorsed a human rights-based approach to so many aspects of our policies, which should be reflected in the outlook and the perspective of members of Parliament and how we respond to this challenge. And lastly, Mr Green is absolutely right to highlight the fact that there remains a significant prevalence of prejudice within our society today. It will take different forms. It has all got to be confronted, because that prejudice is unhealthy in our society, and I give him the commitment from me that that will be confronted by the government on my behalf.
And Alistair Allen.
Presiding Officer, can I warmly welcome today's recognition by the First Minister of the grievous wrongs that have undoubtedly been done to the Gypsy Traveller community over the decades, and for the national apology which he has just made. Can he say anything further, therefore, about the significance of the Scottish Human Rights Commission's ongoing Spotlight project on the cultural recognition of Scotland's Gypsy Traveller community, and when the findings of this research will be published?
Minister. The Spotlight project is an approach which has been taken forward by the Scottish Human Rights Commission, who act independently of government. So at this stage, I don't have the information on publication timescales. But what I will say is that research of this nature is an essential tool in deepening our understanding of the challenges and the lived experiences of the Gypsy Traveller communities. So the Government will pay very close attention to the contents of that material as it becomes available to us.
Thank you. That concludes the First Minister's statement on historical policies affecting Gypsy Traveller communities. I'll allow a moment for front benches to organise before we move on to the next item of business.